The cigarette tasted like burnt paper and regret. I hadn't smoked in years, not since Alice and I first moved into our little bungalow in Silver Lake and promised each other we'd be healthier, more intentional. But tonight, leaning against the side of my car across from the theater, the old habit returned without asking permission. I lit it with the Zippo she gave me for our anniversary, brushed steel with her initials engraved on one side and to more scenes together on the other. Across the street, the acting studio buzzed with soft, sporadic laughter. A warm yellow glow spilled from the doorway. Her class had ended 10 minutes ago. I'd texted, out front, and she'd replied with a heart emoji. Then she didn't come out. I took another drag, flicked ash onto the pavement, and tried not to count the seconds. A couple of students exited. One of them held the door for someone behind him. And then she appeared. Alice stepped into view with that familiar bounce in her walk, her gym bag slung over one shoulder, her hair still damp from rehearsal. For a heartbeat, I felt relief. But then Michael followed her out, the director. Too close. His hand hovered a second too long near her lower back. They said something I couldn't hear. She laughed, tilted her head, and looked up at him like he'd just whispered a secret only she deserved to know. And then, casually, like it was nothing, she leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. It wasn't overt. It wasn't scandalous. But I knew my wife, and I knew her tells. That wasn't a goodbye. That was a continuation. A punctuation mark in a sentence I hadn't known she was writing. I stayed still. My fingers tightened around the Zippo in my coat pocket, its familiar coolness grounding me. I didn't shout. Didn't storm over. I just watched as she lingered, touched his chest briefly, then finally turned to cross the street. I dropped the cigarette and crushed it beneath my boot. "Hey, babe," she said as she approached, smile intact. "Sorry, I got caught up in a scene breakdown. Totally lost track of time." I nodded, unlocked the passenger door. "All good." She climbed in, the scent of lavender shampoo filling the car. I followed, starting the engine. The hum of traffic swallowed the silence between us. "You okay?" she asked, fastening her seatbelt. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." We pulled away from the curb, the studio shrinking behind us in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. She talked about how challenging the monologue was that night, how Michael had pushed them harder than usual. Her voice was bright, animated, too animated. I murmured when appropriate. Said wow and nice in the right places. But inside, something had cracked. A splintering, quiet fracture, the kind that doesn't bleed but leaves you unsteady on your feet. I replayed the way she'd touched him, how his eyes followed her even after she walked away. I thought about how she used to lean into me after class, exhausted and happy, whispering that she'd saved her best lines for me. Now she saved them for someone else. As we merged onto the freeway, the city lights streaking past like memory fragments, I rested my hand on the gearshift, right next to the console where she kept her theater notes. I didn't reach for them. Not yet. But I knew I would. Soon. Quietly. Precisely. Just like the curtain that falls after the final scene, inevitable, silent, and absolute. Before the studio, before Michael, before her late nights and half-truths, there was just us, Alice and me, two people building a quiet life in a loud city. We met at a poetry reading on Melrose, of all places. She'd stood by the punch table critiquing the metaphors of the last speaker, a glass of red wine in one hand, an eyebrow raised in disdain. I'd asked her what she would have done differently. She quoted Pablo Neruda without missing a beat, then asked if I wanted to get tacos. 2 months later, she moved into my apartment. By fall, we'd adopted a rescue dog. By winter, we'd built a bookshelf together that still leaned slightly to the left. Ours was a life of shared rituals, pancakes on Sundays, movie marathons during LA rainstorms, dancing barefoot in the kitchen after long workdays. She taught me to love vintage records, I introduced her to woodworking. She hated the sawdust. I loved her laugh when she tried to sweep it up and ended up in a coughing fit. But small things started to change. The first time she mentioned the acting class, her eyes lit up with a spark I hadn't seen in a while. "It's just one night a week," she said. "Something creative. Just for me." I encouraged it. Bought her a leather-bound notebook to track her scenes. Told her how proud I was that she was stepping into something bold. The first few weeks, she came home buzzing with stories about her classmates, the techniques they were learning, how liberating it felt to express so freely. I listened, fascinated by her enthusiasm. Then her stories started to shrink. Instead of talking about what happened, she'd mumble, "It was fine," or "exhausting." She stopped bringing home her script pages. Started showering the moment she walked through the door. Her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, now lived in her pocket, or face down on the nightstand. I wanted to believe it was just the stress of the class. But then came the receipts. A dinner charge for La Mirage, a dim little place downtown with candlelit tables and a two-person menu. The timestamp said 10:42 p.m., a Thursday. That night, she'd said class had run late and she was too tired to eat. I asked her about it the next morning, casually, over coffee. "Oh, that was with the group," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Michael insisted we do some bonding exercises after rehearsal." "Michael," I repeated. She shrugged. "The director." I didn't push it. But that night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the living room with her phone in my lap. Her passcode hadn't changed. The messages were light, nothing graphic, nothing overt. But there were too many of them. Too many emojis. Too many "can't wait," and "you were brilliant," and "still thinking about that scene." One even said, "Next time, I won't stop you." I felt something cold press against the back of my ribs. I put the phone down, walked to the sink, and splashed water on my face. I didn't scream. Didn't break anything. I stared at the window, at my own faint reflection in the glass, and whispered, "Okay." The next day, I called in sick to work and spent the morning downloading 6 months of joint bank statements. I cross-checked everything: studio payments, dining charges, Uber rides. A pattern formed like shadows behind a curtain. She wasn't slipping away from me. She was already gone. I didn't confront her. Not then. I played my role: loving husband, stable anchor. I made dinner. I rubbed her shoulders. I left a note in her lunch bag like I used to do in our first year of marriage. And I watched. Every Thursday, she came home 20 minutes later than the week before. Every Sunday morning, she received a text that made her smile to herself before she responded with just a heart. I began recording the mileage on her car. She was driving an extra 12 miles on class nights, farther than the route to the studio. I checked the browser history on her laptop. Her Gmail was empty. Her social media logins were clean. Too clean. When I mentioned visiting the studio one night, just to see her perform, she grew tense. "It's not really open to outsiders," she said. "It's distracting. Michael says it throws people off their rhythm." "Michael says a lot of things," I replied. She blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, sipping my coffee. "Just, interesting, how often he comes up." She didn't answer. Later that night, she came to bed later than usual, her hair still damp, her movements quiet. She didn't touch me. I didn't ask her to. Instead, I watched the ceiling fan spin in slow, hypnotic circles and planned my next step. I wasn't just grieving my wife anymore. I was observing her. And I wasn't just watching her spiral out of reach. I was preparing to catch her in the act, cleanly, legally, and with everything I needed in hand. By the end of October, I had gathered enough subtle confirmations to know the truth, even without a single explicit photo or confession. But suspicion alone wasn't power. Proof was. And I was done being passive. I started where logic lives, the legal side. On a Monday morning while Alice was at work, I scheduled a meeting with a family law attorney named Carla Trevino, someone a friend of mine had gone through a messy custody battle with and called ruthless but righteous. Her office was in Glendale, tucked between a dentist and a therapist, and smelled faintly of leather-bound folders and cinnamon tea. She listened quietly as I laid out everything I'd observed. I was careful, measured, no dramatic accusations, just data points. The receipts. The mileage logs. The message snippets. Her name appeared on the guest list of a private industry dinner at the Sierra Playhouse, a dinner I had never heard about and she certainly hadn't attended with me. Carla nodded at intervals, tapping a pen against her notepad. "You're not overreacting," she said flatly. "You're documenting." That's exactly what I'd advise. She explained what I needed to secure: timestamps, communication logs, asset trails. California was a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity could still shift the tone of proceedings, especially when it came to asset division and custody if children were involved. Thankfully, we didn't have kids. But we did have a mortgage. 2 joint accounts. 3 shared credit cards. And I had no intention of letting her walk away with a clean conscience and half my work. "Start backing up everything," Carla said. Quietly. "Don't confront her. Let her feel safe. The more she believes you're unaware, the sloppier she'll get." She handed me a checklist that felt like a war plan. I folded it and tucked it into my jacket like a classified file. That night, I didn't speak much over dinner. She talked about an upcoming showcase. I nodded in the right places, smiled when she joked about the chaos of stage blocking. I took a mental snapshot of her expression, so practiced, so polished. It was her performance face. I matched it with one of my own. I reached out to my oldest friend, Marcus. He'd known me since we were kids biking through cul-de-sacs in Santa Clarita. He worked in IT now and had helped me build a custom PC last year. I didn't need tech support this time, I needed discretion. "You want what?" he asked, his voice tight over the phone. "A local backup of all her messages," I said. "Text, email, DMs. I'm not going to use it illegally. I just need to see if what I suspect is real." There was a long silence. "Okay," he finally said. "You're calm. That scares me more than if you were screaming." "I've done screaming in my head," I replied. "Now I'm doing homework." We met the next day, and he gave me a discreet tool, a backup extraction app that copied all recent communications to a cloud folder only I had access to. The installation took less than a minute on her unlocked laptop. I did it while she showered. My hands didn't even shake. 2 nights later, the texts were there. "Michael, you made that monologue feel like it was only for me." "Alice, maybe it was. I liked that corner backstage. We should use it again." There were 23 exchanges like that. Most timestamped between midnight and 3 a.m. Some were just images, grainy selfies of wine glasses clinking in dim light. One had her reflection in a mirror, with a man's hand clearly resting on her hip. I saved the folder to a secure drive and locked it in my workshop drawer beneath my drill bits and dust masks. By the end of that week, I installed a motion-sensitive camera near our front entry and another in the garage. I wasn't trying to catch her in bed with someone, just to know when she was coming and going, and if she was ever alone. The next time she claimed her evening workshop ended at 10:30, she arrived home at 12:06. No props. No costume bag. Just flushed cheeks, a loosened braid, and a glow I hadn't seen in years. I kept the camera footage. Dated it. Logged it alongside the text evidence and spending trail. I also began separating our finances. I opened a private checking account in my name only, rerouted my paycheck, and halted auto deposits into our joint savings. I opened a credit monitoring alert just in case she tried to liquidate anything suddenly. It was meticulous. Clean. Ethical. I told no one, except my father. He and I weren't close in the loud, emotional sense, but I trusted him. He'd been through his own war decades ago when my mother left with her coworker. He handled it with the same silent dignity I was now borrowing. When I told him over a quiet lunch at a diner, he set down his fork and nodded once. "You've got good instincts," he said. "And a spine. Don't let her fracture that with fake apologies." She hasn't apologized. She will. When it's too late. He didn't offer advice. Just listened. That was all I needed. In private, I prepared a custody draft for the dog. It may sound laughable, but Ollie had been ours since year one. I wasn't going to let her treat him like furniture she'd outgrown. I logged all vet visits in my name, every purchase, every training session. I was ready. The last piece of the puzzle was housing. If things went south quickly, I'd need a place to land. I called an old college friend who had a studio unit above his garage in Highland Park. He said it was mine on 48 hours' notice. Thanks, I said. I hope I won't need it. But I knew I would. One night, as Alice reheated soup in the microwave, she looked at me from across the kitchen and said, "You've been distant lately." Have I? You seem quieter. I held her gaze, calm. Just thinking about the future. She smiled. Me too. And I thought, not the same future. The confrontation didn't happen in a blaze of shouting or slammed doors. It happened in the quiet hum of a Sunday afternoon, the kind that used to smell like fresh laundry and sound like Ollie's paws padding across hardwood. I asked her to sit with me in the living room. No TV. No background music. Just us, and a heavy stillness thick enough to bite through. Alice sat down on the gray couch, folding her legs beneath her. She wore a soft cardigan, my favorite one on her, back when I had favorite things about her. "Is something wrong?" she asked, feigning casual concern. But her hands moved too much. Adjusting a throw pillow. Brushing a non-existent hair off her knee. She knew something was coming. I nodded and stood, walking to the sideboard. From the drawer, I took out a small wooden box. Nothing special. A cigar case I had repurposed to store the final pieces of my puzzle. I sat across from her, placed the box on the coffee table, and opened the lid. Inside was the wedding photo. The one from Big Sur. Wind in her hair, her nose wrinkled from laughing, my arm around her waist like I thought forever was real. I placed it face up between us. Next to it, I set a printed screenshot of the messages. Her phone name displayed in the corner. Her words. His replies. The late-night timestamp. Her winking emojis. His, "Let's use that corner backstage again." Lastly, I placed a USB drive, the full backup Marcus helped me pull. It contained everything. Nothing graphic. But enough to burn trust down to ash. Her face drained in slow motion, as if she were watching herself drown. I didn't want to believe it, I said. So I verified. And I double verified. I didn't storm around, didn't accuse you out of emotion. I just followed the evidence. She didn't speak. Her mouth moved once, then stopped. I wanted this to be a life we built, I continued, nodding at the photo. And you turned it into a rehearsal. A role you performed while running another show backstage. Her voice finally cracked through. It's not what you think. No. It's exactly what I think. My tone didn't rise. That control, that composure, I wore it like armor now. She reached for the wedding photo. I pulled it back. No. Her lip trembled. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. Over and over. With intention. With planning. That's the part one won't forget. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, suddenly smaller. It was never about him. It was about feeling alive again. That was the closest thing to honesty she had ever given me since it started. Not regret. Not love. Just selfishness, laid bare and simple. And what do you feel now? I asked. She didn't answer. I stood and walked to the coat closet. From the shelf, I took down a small suitcase, hers. Already packed with essentials. I'd done it that morning, methodically. Not out of vengeance, but efficiency. You're going to stay with him now, I said. Or wherever you've been spending your late nights. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't move. I let them fall like props on an empty stage. Are you really throwing everything away like this? She whispered. You threw it away, I said, nodding at the USB drive. I'm just cataloging the debris. She reached for me, but I stepped back. I'll have our attorney send the paperwork. You'll see it this week. The accounts are already separated. Don't contact me unless it's through legal channels. She stood slowly, the weight of her choices finally sitting on her shoulders. I walked to the front door and opened it. She picked up the suitcase without another word. As she stepped outside, I glanced back at the coffee table. The photo remained. I picked it up. Looked at it one last time. Then placed it face down. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in April, Los Angeles rare weather, a kind of cinematic gray that would have made Alice joke about more movies. But there was no drama left. Just a courthouse clerk sliding signed papers across a laminate desk. No audience. No applause. The terms were clean. She waived spousal support. I retained the house, the car, and primary custody of Ollie, though, truthfully, I think she knew she'd never be welcome in that house again. The one we'd painted together. The one with the dent in the wall from our first attempt at hanging floating shelves. The one I now moved through alone, freely. I didn't feel triumph. Just clarity. Like walking out of a fog and seeing the horizon again. I started running in the mornings. Not far, just through the old neighborhood, past bougainvillea-draped fences and bakeries waking up. It gave me rhythm, gave me breath. I fixed the loose porch steps. Refinished the dining table. Replaced her coffee mug with one that just said, begin. Ollie sensed the shift. He stopped waiting by the door at 7:30. He curled up beside me when I read at night, quiet and steady. We both had healing to do, and we did it in parallel. I started therapy, too. At first, I just sat there, arms crossed, listing the facts like courtroom exhibits. But gradually, I let silence fill the space between words. Let anger have its moment without controlling the room. Let grief show its face without shame. My therapist asked me once if I ever missed her. I didn't lie. I missed the version of her that existed in my head. The one who danced barefoot and recited Neruda. But she left before the affair. She just didn't tell me. I didn't date. Didn't post cryptic quotes online. But I did write. At first, it was just a journal. Bullet points. Then paragraphs. Then a blog. I titled it The Second Draft. Each post chronicled part of my journey, not to shame her, but to remind myself that healing isn't linear, and dignity can be loud in its quiet. Strangers reached out. Other men, mostly. Husbands. Fathers. People who had been blindsided and left to rebuild without blueprints. Some wrote one-liners, this gave me strength. Others sent pages. I replied to all of them. Eventually, I hosted a support group once a month. Just a few chairs in a church basement and a pot of bad coffee. We talked about control, not chaos. About trust, not revenge. About becoming authors of our own endings. I hung the old wedding photo in the hallway. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. A relic of the life I believed in, and the one I refused to lose myself to. One morning, while jogging, I passed the local theater, the one where Alice once rehearsed. A flyer flapped on the wall, new season auditions, all welcome. I didn't stop. Just smiled, let the irony pass like the breeze, and ran on. The story was no longer about her. It was about me. Still standing. Still kind. Still writing.